everyone. So today I'm going to show you how to make this Valentine's Day card using Lawn Fawn's Baked with Love, Bun in the Oven, and Sweetest Friend stamp sets. And there's two versions I'll show you today. There is the orange, red, and pink palette card that is going to be demonstrated in this video. And then there's this one, which has teal, orange, and red color scheme. So let's get started by just drawing in some lines to help us determine where we're going to put our images. And this is a kitchen counter scene, so we're going to need one level for the background tile, one level for the counter, and then countertop, and then one level for the counter below it. So we're going to hang two of the oven mitts on the edge of the counter just to help reinforce the idea that this is a 3D photo. Where we're showing both like horizontal and vertical dimension. I don't even know if that's a term, but that's what I'm going with. And then we're going to do a lot of masking with these different images. So I cut out all of the masks offline before I put the video together. Probably took maybe about 45 minutes of just like stamping and cutting out masks, but it was nice and relaxing, perfect activity for cold, snowy evening we were having here in Illinois last night. Thankfully, we are now out of the danger zone with respect to temperatures, and we're up to a balmy, I think 4 degrees was where we are the last I checked, and it's really, really early on Friday morning when I'm doing this voiceover. So it's nice to be like past the worst of it. And I hope everybody out there in the Northeast and the Midwest that you're all doing well. All right, so I'm just gonna keep on stamping and masking, and the principle that I use is that any of the images that appear in the forefront you stamp first, and then whatever's behind them you stamp second after you mask the image in front of it. So it's a little bit of a puzzle as you're working through it, but fortunately by the time I did this version I already had the teal version that I just kind of kept in front of me as a guide, so I knew what images were in front of the others. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is work on the tiles or the bricks that are behind the countertop. And I'm just going to use some toner grays for this, but any of your grays would work here. You just want to have like 2 to 3 variations of color. So my method for doing this is that I draw in my bricks with my T1, and then I will put in a shadow with a T3, and then I will blend everything together with a T0. And by using that method, I found that it gives me a texture that is really close to brick, where the face of the brick, it's all kind of uneven and lumpy. There's just something about going in with a light marker and then a dark marker and then a super light marker to blend everything together that just gives you that I don't know, realistic effect, at least with respect to bricks or any kind of stone. So that's just what I'm doing here. And when I apply my shadows, I like to pick a side. And for this wall, I decided that the shadows would come from the right side. So for bricks, I always do shadows in an L shape. So here we have our L shape. It's kind of like an L that's sort of lying down, just kind of relaxing, hanging out in the background. And then I will put a little tiny L up in the corner of the other side of where I put the shadow, just to give some definition to both sides of the brick. So the way to think of it is like one big lying down L and then one tiny little upside down L on the other side. Can you see it? Do you see the little L's? All right, so we're almost done with this. And then we are gonna move on to just shading in our countertop. And because I had used the orange, teal, and red color scheme in the other card, which that's the card that I did first, I decided to do something a little bit different, and I wanted to keep with a Valentine's Day color scheme, so that's why I substituted the pink for teal. And what I'm doing here, I'm just going over all the bricks with a BG70, and that's just to kind of blend everything together, give the background some cohesiveness, and then also add like a tiny little pop of color other than that gray. So we have this like really, really light kind of grayish, bluish grayish thing going on in the background. And for the countertop, in version 1, I used kind of like a peachy color for the countertop, and for version 2 I decided let's go a little blue-green. So I used BG000, and then we're going to darken up the edges at the end with a darker BG color. For the little eggs, I decided I wanted a mixture of white and brown eggs because variety is the spice of life. So for the brown eggs, I'm using E50, 51, 53, and then a little E55 on the very corner of the egg. See now I'm adding in my darkest shade there. And I put a little bit of shading also at the top of the bowl where the egg is sticking out too, just to make it look a little bit more real looking, I guess. And then for the white eggs, I used my warm gray markers for that. So I used a W3, a W1, and I think a W00. And perhaps at some point, maybe even along the very edge, I used a W5, but I don't remember. I guess we'll see together. So far it looks like no, I'm just sticking with the W3 as the darkest and the WOO as the lightest. For our rolling pin, I decided to try to make a version that was a little darker than the original rolling pin. I'm using the same exact markers in this version as I did in the first, but I'm just a little heavier handed with my darker markers in the E40s family. So the markers I use to make this are E40, 41, 43, and 44. And I'm trying to add some little stripes of color just to kind of mimic the look of natural wood, because I have a little wooden rolling pin here, and trying to leave a little bit of a highlight in the center, so that's why I'm avoiding my dark marker in those areas. And then I'm just going to add some shading along the handles with E44. And for the shading, it's just a really, really thin strip of color that is then blended out with one of your lighter markers to kind of give the shadow on the rolling pin. And I'm just darkening up my shadows, and then I am blending it all together on the rolling pin. Probably went a little too dark on the rolling pin. If I did it again, I'd probably go lighter, but you know, I wanted to try something a little different from the first version. For the flower, I'm going to use my E40s again, so E41, E43, and then E44 for a little shadow. And these are brown markers, but they can also kind of look like whitish depending on what other colors are around it. And because we already have that toner gray in the background for the bricks, I thought we needed kind of a different shade to make our flower stand out. And you know, maybe our chef here, maybe she's a healthy cook, maybe she's using whole wheat flour, so maybe that's why it's dark. Not sure, but anyway. So for the flower itself, we're going to use our neutral grays, and I picked neutral grays here just because I did need I needed a different gray to stand out from that background. And I thought cool gray would just be like a little bit too much, like too much contrast, but I thought the neutrals might kind of give me a nice soft contrast between the wall and the flower. And I just love this scene, so I don't know about you, but whenever I bake, this is definitely what my kitchen looks like. It's a mess. There's stuff dripping everywhere. There are, you know, items that you wouldn't expect to be there just kind of floating around. Like that's why I added the little strawberries. It's not quite clear what role the strawberries play in our baking here, except maybe to be a little topper for our cupcakes. But I just, you know, I know that this is what my counter looks like. And also the red gave a nice little pop of color throughout this scene. So that's another reason for adding the strawberries. For the butter, I'm going to use some real traditional colors, Y11, Y15, and Y19, and then a little Y00 in the middle just to lighten things up, give some contrast. For our wooden spoons, I'm going to make two different versions, one with some E30 markers and then another with some E20 markers. The E20 markers will give you a much richer brown, and the E30s is a little bit softer, kind of warm. So it's nice if you're trying to just give a little bit of interest to a scene where you have two items that are the same thing, but you want them to look a little bit different. So that's why I use the two different browns there. For our little cinnamon rolls, we're going to go back to our E50s for the bready pastry part. And I'm going to use like E50, 51, 53, and 55. And some we're going to make a little more toasty than others. And we're also going to have two kinds of frosting. So we're going to have some traditional cinnamon frosting on some rolls, and then also I thought maybe some clear glaze on the others. And for the clear glaze, I'm just using my warm gray markers to make a nice white frosting. For our little pastry bag filled with pink icing, we're going to use some traditional pink colors, R81, 83, 85, and A89. And I'm just going to add my shading with the darkest marker, the R89, and then just kind of blend everything together. So there's a nice variation in the different pink colors. Then I'm going to do the same thing to the little cupcake in the back. And we're going to use those same pinks and shade it exactly the way we did the pastry bag. And I combined one of the cupcakes from the Bake with Love stamp set with this little orange cupcake behind from the Bun in the Oven stamp set. I like that they're different sizes, so it also helps to reinforce the fact that the cupcake with the pink icing is closer to us than the cupcake with the orange icing. So whenever you have stamp sets that have stamps that are different sizes, it can help you to create depth in a scene. So you would put your smaller items towards the back of the scene and then your larger items to the front. So that's why if you look at the flower, if you were to put the flower and the rolling pin side by side, they might look a little bit just not sized appropriately. But when you put the flower against the back of the wall and then you put the rolling pin towards the front of the scene, almost hanging off the counter, about to fall. And again, this is inspired by real life kitchen scenes that I've had in my house. Then it helps to, you know, reinforce the fact that this rolling pin is closer to us because it's bigger, and the flower is farther away because it's smaller. So just something to think about when you have stamps and they're not all the same sizes. I know sometimes I could get a little sad and depressed. I'm like, oh, how am I going to use them together? But the trick is you use them by it's a good chance to just add some depth to your scene and put the big things in the front and the small things in the back. So another way to kind of help to combine all your different stamps. So now we're gonna color in our bowl, and I'm gonna use some nice bright oranges here. I was really inspired lately to use orange by, there was this one card maker on Instagram called Amy Young Forever, and she posted this amazing picture of one of the picket fence studio stamps of one of the beautiful girls. And it was this amazing picture of this girl with this like strawberry blonde hair, and she's against a green background. And I was just like, that's amazing. So I looked up which color she used for her oranges, and I've been using that color palette a lot lately. It's so beautiful and bright. So just an example of the different ways that, you know, we can be inspired by other artists and then have that inspiration kind of, you know, get into our own work to make it better and different than maybe something we would have come up on our own. Now for the counter edge, I want it to be like a wood grain. So I'm just adding stripes of brown in my different E20s and E30s markers. And this is really fun. It's kind of a Zen activity to add these little stripes because there's no right or wrong way to do it. You just kind of draw little stripes here and there. They can be curvy, they can be straight. It's just whatever you want because that's how wood grain looks. And then when you have enough lines, you just blend it all together with a mid-tone marker. In this case, I used the E34. Then we get some pretty wood. All right, now we're gonna color in the oven mitts. And for these oven mitts, I decided to make them red and pink. Again, I wanted to, you know, reinforce the idea that this is a Valentine's Day themed card by using some traditional Valentine's Day colors. So that's why I'm going with my reds and my pinks. And for the red glove or oven mitt, I'm going to use one of my favorite combinations to make the red, which is R24, 29, 39, and then a little pop of YR12 in the center to brighten everything up. Now it's time to kind of add our highlights and our little decorations to the scene just to make everything pop and come to life. And I'm going to add some little white dots to the strawberries to mimic the little indentations in strawberries. We're going to put some dots on the cinnamon rolls, some highlights to the eggs, Some of these are meant to be realistic, some are meant to kind of just add a little artsy feel to it, just make things look a little interesting. So I'm just trying to make things pretty, really. Thought I'd make like a little design on the edges of this of the cake stand by making some large and small dots, and then we're just going to add some highlights to the rolling pin and the flower. And then I also added some little specks of flour like behind the rolling pin and around the little pile of flour. So I just kind of dotted my white gel pen in that area to make it look like the chef or the cook or the baker is in the middle of just still rolling things out. She hasn't cleaned up her scene yet, because again, that's what my kitchen would look like if I were baking. And then I decided I needed to darken out the edges of my countertop a little just to help with the depth in the scene. So that's why I'm going back over the edges with a BG10 or a BG11 marker. Don't remember which I used, but either would work. And then I thought we'd add some little hearts from the Sweetest Friend stamp set, just as a nice little decoration to reinforce the Valentine's Day theme. Add a little pop of color into the scene and just make everything sweet. And now we're going to add our sentiment. I thought a cute sentiment for this one would be, "You are all I need, happy Valentine's Day." And these sentiments come from the Baked with Love and Sweetest Friend stamp sets. I am stamping it with black VersaFine ink, and then I added clear embossing powder over it to make it kind of pop out. And then I just colored in my little heart with a Copic marker. Don't recommend doing that after you've embossed something, but you know, I lived dangerously at the time. So now I just added some glossy accents also to the heart in Happy Heart Day, just to make it pop a little bit more. And then the final touch, and I didn't remember to do this until I was staging the card, was to add the little drip of frosting out of the tip of the pastry bag and have it drip down the counter, which is absolutely what a baking scene would look like in my kitchen. So I hope you enjoyed these cards, everyone. I hope you give it a try. It's a lot of fun. It's very relaxing to do the masking. And then once you have all of your masks removed, it's just so much fun to just sit and color all those sweet little images. So that's all I have for now. Have a great weekend, and I will see you again soon in the next video.